toy fans, Aaron here. Tonight, taking a look at the vintage collection release of Lando Calrissian from the Solo movie. So let's head to that table and check this one out. And here is a look at young Lando on that vintage collection card back, and amazingly, it took a little over a year for us to get a single carded version of a young Lando Calrissian. For the Solo line, he was only released on a 2-pack, but we finally have him, and things are looking pretty good here. As I mentioned, it is the vintage collection line, and with that you have a nice image of Lando as we met him playing Sabacc. And through that blister, you're seeing the figure along with the included accessory that you're getting, which is his weapon. On the back side, everything's pretty much in line with what you get for the vintage collection. Top half talks about celebrating the legacy of Star Wars, along with showing you 6 other figures that are also available in the line, or actually I should say 5, with one of those being the figure that you're getting here. Top right corner, you can see he's number 139 in the lineup. And now taking a look at the figure out of the packaging. First up, there are a couple differences from the regular 5-point articulated release that was done for that 2-pack. While for the most part, things were looking pretty okay for that regular 5-point release, the biggest head scratcher was why his scarf was molded as part of his cape. Thankfully for this vintage collection release, that is no longer the case. His scarf is separately sculpted, and this time around the inside of his cape is even painted blue instead of being all black. You are getting a different head sculpt this time, and things are looking much better with this release. You're getting a bit more detailing along the belt, a little tie off to the left side of his hip. That belt is now separately sculpted along with the holster off to the right side of his thigh, and not to mention all the added articulation that you're getting with this newer figure. Concentrating now on just this vintage collection release, and as I said, things are indeed looking really good. Through the head sculpt, you got a great likeness of Donald Glover. The hair sculpting looks wonderful. Pretty decent paint job in the face, kind of highlighting the raised eyebrows a little bit. Maybe it's going a little bit too far, but it still looks pretty good to me. Expression on his face looks great. The eyes are painted in very nicely. And paint job for his beard is looking pretty good also. Looking at the cape, it drapes nicely over his shoulders, and it stays in place very well. Pretty good folds and stuff sculpted in there. I like the open collar. Same as I mentioned on the 6-inch version, you got some little lines sculpted in there, giving you a feeling of a little bit of a different texture. On the inside of the cape, take this off real quick so you can see that, and this time around they painted it a very nice baby blue color. Different shade of blue than what was used for the 6-inch release, but I think this still looks pretty good to me. And looking at the upper body without that cape, first his scarf sits very well around the neck and over the body. Nice drape there for that. Also the little white stripes painted in there looking pretty good. As for the rest of the chest and the arms, that yellow shirt is really popping. It's a nice vibrant yellow, but not neon. The folded down flap of black is looking good, along with a little black stripe at the pocket. Otherwise, some nice wrinkles and stuff sculpted in there, certainly making it look like you would expect a shirt to look like. Through the belt, for the most part, painting's looking pretty good. It does seem that that brighter red color is extending down a little bit farther than it should be, but that's not overly noticeable. Otherwise, as you can see, you got some nice black vertical lines in there for some belt loops for that little belt fabric to be going through, and you got some extra fabric kind of sculpted in there, draping over the belt holster, which, as I already mentioned, is separately sculpted. That lays around his waist pretty well. It's glued on at the point of contact where that little knotted piece of the belt extends off to the side. On his right thigh, you have his holster. I'll show how that works out when I go through that accessory. Down at the bottom end, though, that is where it's going to be attached to his thigh. So you're going to have some limited movement within that joint. And once again, I will show that off when I go through the articulation. Sculpting for the pant legs are looking pretty good. Got some nice sharp seams running down the front of the pant legs. And then as you see, just some very subtle wrinkles in there. Gives the figure some added dimension, but doesn't make him look too sloppy, because we know Lando's supposed to be the sharp-dressed guy, right? As for articulation, head of course spins all the way around, and you do have a double post in that neck, so you can kind of slide that head forward and back a little bit there. Good range for tilting his head side to side, and you even get plenty of up and down. At the shoulders, both arms are going to rotate all the way around, and they come straight out. Great bend at the elbow going past 90 degrees, and those arms do swivel all the way around. Each wrist rotates. His left hand swivels side to side with a pretty good range of motion there. His right hand does have a joint to go up and down, but I am struggling due to the size of the cuff coming over his hand to get anything out of that. As for the waist, he gets side to side, rotates all the way around, and can even crunch forward and back like so. As for the leg articulation, this leg does bend about like so. And for his right leg, due to that belt and holster being sculpted on there, not getting a lot of range of motion on there. That holster does bend up a little bit to give you some room, but I think realistically you're getting what you want. Also inside that hip joint you get your rotation, so you can bring your legs straight out, give it a little bend, and he can be seated, but not all that well, because this is where the limitation of that holster being glued onto the leg comes into play. So you're not going to end up with a great seated position for him because of that, but you still get some good play in there for turning the thigh side to side, making use of that upper thigh swivel joint. Single bend at the knee, and then also that rotates around, and the feet go back about that far, forward as such, and then of course you get your rotation in there. As far as accessories, it comes with a single blaster, and this is going to be a little bit different than what we got for the basic release of the figure. This time it's got like a little silencer or nozzle or something sculpted at the end. And aside from that added barrel, sculpting is looking pretty similar, but you are getting a touch more detailing on this Vintage Collection release. A couple stripes of black painting at the top of the scope. Blaster fits well in his right hand and no problem getting that index finger to slide into the trigger. As I mentioned about that function holster on the side of his hip, you know, a little bit of a disappointment here. Unfortunately, the bottom hole on his holster does not allow this larger barrel to slide through. Or at least on my figure that is the case. So, unfortunately, my guy can't use the holster. Okay, well I guess you could leave it like that, but that's not really how it's meant to sit. So overall, that little holster issue aside, this is still a pretty sharp looking figure. I think it's a good upgrade from that basic release that we had. While the sculpting and painting of that basic release wasn't horrible, the fact that this time around they separated out that scarf from his cape, and not to mention the added articulation you're receiving, definitely makes this one worth the purchase if you're someone who already has the basic release. And if you're not someone who's already got the basic release, then I don't know what you're waiting for. Maybe you just didn't like the movie, which is fine, but definitely I think this is a worthy figure to add to your collection. And that wraps up this look at the Lando Calrissian action figure from the Vintage Collection. As always, I'd love to know what your thoughts are on this figure in the comment section below, and thanks for watching.